The Insidious Dr. Fu-Manchu by SAX ROHMER, Part 4, Chapter 13. I will tell you now of a strange dream which I dreamed, and of the stranger things to which I awakened. Since, out of a void this vision burst in upon my mind, I cannot do better than relate it, without preamble. It was thus: I dreamed that I lay writhing on the floor in agony indescribable. My veins were filled with liquid fire, but that Stygian darkness was about me. I told myself that I must have seen the smoke arising from my burning body. This, I thought, was death. Then a cooling shower descended upon me, soaked through skin and tissue to the tortured arteries, and quenched the fire within. Panting but free from pain, I lay, exhausted. Strength gradually returning to me, I tried to rise, but the carpet felt so singularly soft that it offered me no foothold. I waded and plunged like a swimmer treading water, and all about me rose impenetrable walls of darkness all but palpable. I wondered why I could not see the windows. The horrible idea flashed to my mind that I was become blind. Somehow I got upon my feet and stood swaying dizzily. I became aware of a heavy perfume, and knew it for some kind of incense. Then a dim light was born, at an immeasurable distance away. It grew steadily in brilliance. It spread like a bluish-red stain, like a liquid. It lapped up the darkness and spread throughout the room. But this was not my room, nor was it any room known to me. It was an apartment of such size that its dimensions filled me with a kind of awe, such as I never had known, the awe of walled vastness. Its immense extent produced a sensation of sound. Its hugeness had a distinct note. Tapestries covered the four walls. There was no door visible. These tapestries were magnificently figured with golden dragons, and as the serpentine bodies gleamed and shimmered in the increasing radiance, each dragon, I thought, intertwined its glittering coils more closely with those of another. The carpet was of such richness that I stood knee-deep in its pile. And this, too, was fashioned all over with golden dragons, and they seemed to glide about amid the shadows of the designs stealthily. At the farther end of the hall, for hall it was, a huge table with dragon's legs stood solitary amid the luxuriance of the carpet. It bore scintillating globes, and tubes that held living organisms, and books of a size and in such bindings as I never had imagined, with instruments of a type unknown to Western science. A heterogeneous litter quite indescribable, which overflowed onto the floor, forming an amazing oasis in a dragon-haunted desert of carpet. A lamp hung above this table, suspended by golden chains from the ceiling, which were so lofty that, following the chains upward, my gaze lost itself in the purple shadows above. In a chair piled high with dragon-covered cushions, a man sat behind this table. The light from the swinging lamp fell fully upon one side of his face as he leaned forward amid the jumble of weird objects and left the other side in purplish shadow. From a plain brass bowl upon the corner of the huge table, smoke writhed aloft and at times partially obscured that dreadful face. From the instant that my eyes were drawn to the table and to the man who sat there, neither the incredible extent of the room nor the nightmare fashion of its mural decorations could reclaim my attention. I had eyes only for him, for it was Dr. Fu-Manchu. Something of the delirium which had seemed to fill my veins with fire, to people the walls with dragons, and to plunge me knee-deep in the carpet, left me. Those dreadful, filmed green eyes acted somewhat like a cold douche. I knew, without removing my gaze from the still face, that the walls no longer lived, but were merely draped in exquisite Chinese dragon tapestry. The rich carpet beneath my feet ceased to be as a jungle, and became a normal carpet, extraordinarily rich, but merely a carpet. But the sense of vastness nevertheless remained, with the uncomfortable knowledge that the things upon the table and overflowing about it were all, or nearly all, of a fashion strange to me. Then, and almost instantaneously, the comparative sanity which I had temporarily experienced began to slip from me again. For the smoke faintly penciled through the air, from the burning perfume on the table, grew in volume, thickened, and wafted towards me in a cloud of grey horror. It enveloped me, clammily. Dimly, through its oily wreaths, I saw the immobile yellow face of Fu-Manchu. and my stupefied brain acclaimed him a sorcerer, against whom unwittingly we had pitted our poor human wits. The green eyes showed filmy through the fog. An intense pain shot through my lower limbs, and, catching my breath, I looked down. As I did so, the points of the red slippers which I dreamed that I wore increased in length, curled sinuously upward, twined about my throat, and choked the breath from my body. Came an interval, and then a dawning-like consciousness, but it was a false consciousness, since it brought with it the idea that my head lay softly pillowed, and that a woman's hand caressed my throbbing forehead. Confusedly, as though in the remote past, I recalled a kiss, and the recollection thrilled me strangely. Dreamily content I lay, and a voice stole to my ears. "They are killing him! They are killing him! Oh, do you not understand?" In my dazed condition, I thought that it was I who had died, and that this musical girl voice was communicating to me the fact of my own dissolution. But I was conscious of no interest in the matter. For hours and hours, I thought, that soothing hand caressed me. I never once raised my heavy lids, until there came a resounding crash that seemed to set my very bones vibrating, a metallic, jangling crash, as the fall of heavy chains. I thought that, then, I half opened my eyes, and that in the dimness I had a fleeting glimpse of a figure clad in gossamer silk, with arms covered with barbaric bangles and slim ankles surrounded by gold bands. The girl was gone, even as I told myself that she was an Uri, and that I, though a Christian, had been consigned by some error to the paradise of Mohammed. Then, a complete blank. My head throbbed madly, my brain seemed to be clogged inert, and though my first feeble movement was followed by the rattle of a chain, some moments more elapsed ere I realized that the chain was fastened to a steel collar, that the steel collar was clasped about my neck. I moaned weakly. "Smith," I muttered, "where are you? Smith!" Onto my knees I struggled, and the pain on the top of my skull grew all but insupportable. It was coming back to me now. How Nayland Smith and I had started for the hotel to warn Graham Guthrie, how, as we passed up the steps from the embankment and into Essex Street, we saw the big motor standing before the door of one of the offices. I could recall coming up level with the car, a modern limousine, but my mind retained no impression of our having passed it. Only a vague memory of a rush of footsteps, a blow. Then my vision of the Hall of Dragons, and now this real awakening to a worse reality. Groping in the darkness, my hands touched a body that lay close beside me. My fingers sought and found the throat, sought and found the steel collar about it. "Smith," I groaned, and I shook the still form. "Smith, old man, speak to me. Smith, could he be dead? Was this the end of his gallant fight with Dr. Fu-Manchu and the murder group? If so, what did the future hold for me? What had I to face?" He stirred beneath my trembling hands. "Thank God," I muttered, and I cannot deny that my joy was tainted with selfishness, for waking in that impenetrable darkness, and yet obsessed with the dream I had dreamed, I had known what fear meant. At the realization that alone, chained, I must face the dreadful Chinese doctor in the flesh. Smith began incoherent mutterings. Sandbagged. "Look out, Petrie, he has us at last. Oh, heavens!" He struggled onto his knees, clutching at my hand. "All right, old man," I said. "We are both alive, so let's be thankful." A moment's silence, a groan, then, "Petrie, I have dragged you into this." "God forgive me. Doctor up, Smith," I said slowly. "I'm not a child. There is no question of being dragged into the matter. I'm here, and if I can be of any use, I'm glad I am here." He grasped my hand. There were two Chinese, in European clothes. Lord, how my head throbs, in that office door. They sandbagged us. Petrie, think of it, in broad daylight, within hail of the Strand. We were rushed into the car, and it was all over before. His voice grew faint. "God, they gave me an awful knock. Why have we been spared, Smith? Do you think he is saving us for—" "Don't, Petrie. If you had been in China, if you had seen what I have seen—" Footsteps sounded on the flagged passage. A blade of light crept across the floor towards us. My brain was growing clearer. The place had a damp, earthen smell. It was slimy some noisome cellar. A door was thrown open, and a man entered, carrying a lantern. Its light showed my surmise to be accurate, showed the slime-coated walls of a dungeon some 15 feet square, shone upon the long yellow robe of the man who stood watching us, upon the malignant, intellectual countenance. It was Dr. Fu-Manchu. At last they were face to face, the head of the great yellow movement, and the man who fought on behalf of the entire white race. How can I paint the individual who now stood before us, perhaps the greatest genius of modern times? Of him it had been fitly said that he had a brow like Shakespeare and a face like Satan. Something serpentine, hypnotic, was in his very presence. Smith drew one sharp breath and was silent. Together, chained to the wall, two medieval captives, living mockeries of our boasted modern security, we crouched before Dr. Fu-Manchu. He came forward with an indescribable gait, cat-like yet awkward, carrying his high shoulders almost hunched. He placed the lantern in a niche in the wall, never turning away the reptilian gaze of those eyes which must haunt my dreams forever. They possessed a viridescence which hitherto I had supposed possible only in the eye of the cat, and the film intermittently clouded their brightness, but I can speak of them no more. I had never supposed, prior to meeting Dr. Fu-Manchu, that so intense a force of malignancy could radiate from any human being. He spoke. His English was perfect. Though at times his words were oddly chosen, his delivery alternately was guttural and sibilant. "Mr. Smith and Dr. Petrie, your interference with my plans has gone too far. I have seriously turned my attention to you." He displayed his teeth, small and evenly separated, but discoloured in a way that was familiar to me. I studied his eyes with a new professional interest, which even the extremity of our danger could not wholly banish. Their greenness seemed to be of the iris. The pupil was oddly contracted, a pinpoint. Smith leaned his back against the wall with assumed indifference. "You have presumed," continued Fu-Manchu, "to meddle with a world change. Poor spiders, caught in the wheels of the inevitable. You have linked my name with the futility of the young China movement, the name of Fu-Manchu. Mr. Smith, you are an incompetent meddler. I despise you. Dr. Petrie, you are a fool. I am sorry for you." He rested one bony hand on his hip, narrowing the long eyes as he looked down on us. The purposeful cruelty of the man was inherent. It was entirely untheatrical. Still Smith remained silent. "So I am determined to remove you from the scene of your blunders," added Fu-Manchu. "Opium will very shortly do the same for you." I rapped at him savagely. Without emotion, he turned the narrowed eyes upon me. "That is a matter of opinion, Doctor," he said. "You may have lacked the opportunities which have been mine for studying that subject, and, in any event, I shall not be privileged to enjoy your advice in the future." "You will not long outlive me," I replied. "And our debts will not profit you incidentally because—" Smith's foot touched mine. "Because?" inquired Fu-Manchu softly. "Ah, Mr. Smith is so prudent. He is thinking that I have files." He pronounced the word in a way that made me shudder. "Mr. Smith has seen a wire jacket. Have you ever seen a wire jacket? As a surgeon, its functions would interest you." I stifled a cry that rose to my lips, for, with a shrill whistling sound, a small shape came bounding into the dimly lit vault, then shot upward. A marmoset landed on the shoulder of Dr. Fu-Manchu and peered grotesquely into the dreadful yellow face. The doctor raised his bony hand and fondled the little creature, crooning to it. "One of my pets, Mr. Smith," he said, suddenly opening his eyes fully so that they blazed like green lamps. "I have others, equally useful. My scorpions. Have you met my scorpions? No? My pythons and hamadryads. Then there are my fungi and my tiny allies, the bacilli. I have a collection in my laboratory quite unique. Have you ever visited Molokai, the leper island, Doctor? No? But Mr. Nayland Smith will be familiar with the asylum at Rangoon. And we must not forget my black spiders with their diamond eyes, my spiders that sit in the dark and watch, then leap." He raised his lean hands so that the sleeve of the robe fell back to the elbow, and the ape dropped, chattering, to the floor and ran from the cellar. "O God of Cathay," he cried, "by what death shall these die, these miserable ones who would bind thine empire, which is boundless?" Like some priest of Tezcat he stood, his eyes upraised to the roof, his lean body quivering. A sight to shock the most unimpressionable mind. "He is mad," I whispered to Smith. "God help us, the man is a dangerous homicidal maniac." Nayland Smith's tanned face was very drawn, but he shook his head grimly. "Dangerous, yes, I agree," he muttered. "His existence is a danger to the entire white race, which, now, we are powerless to avert." Dr. Fu-Manchu recovered himself, took up the lantern and, turning abruptly, walked to the door with his awkward yet feline gait. At the threshold, he looked back. "You would have warned Mr. Graham Guthrie," he said in a soft voice. "Tonight, at 12:30, Mr. Graham Guthrie dies." Smith sat silent and motionless, his eyes fixed upon the speaker. "You were in Rangoon in 1908, continued Dr. Fu-Manchu. "You remember the call?" From somewhere above us, I could not determine the exact direction, came a low, wailing cry, an uncanny thing of falling cadences which, in that dismal vault, with the sinister yellow-robed figure at the door, seemed to pour ice into my veins. Its effect upon Smith was truly extraordinary. His face showed greyly in the faint light, and I heard him draw a hissing breath through clenched teeth. "It calls for you," said Fu-Manchu. "At 12:30 it calls for Graham Guthrie." The door closed, and darkness mantled us again. "Smith," I said, "what was that?" The horrors about us were playing havoc with my nerves. "It was the call of Siva," replied Smith hoarsely. "What is it? Who uttered it? What does it mean?" "I don't know what it is, Petrie, nor who utters it, but it means death." Chapter 14. There may be some who could have lain, chained to that noisome cell, and felt no fear, no dread of what the blackness might hold. I confess that I am not one of these. I knew that Nayland Smith and I stood in the path of the most stupendous genius who in the world's history had devoted his intellect to crime. I knew that the enormous wealth of the political group backing Dr. Fu-Manchu rendered him a menace to Europe and to America greater than that of the plague. He was a scientist trained at a great university, an explorer of nature's secrets who had gone farther into the unknown, I suppose, than any living man. His mission was to remove all obstacles, human obstacles, from the path of that secret movement which was progressing in the Far East. Smith and I were two such obstacles, and of all the horrible devices at his command, I wondered, and my tortured brain refused to leave the subject, by which of them were we doomed to be dispatched. Even at that very moment some venomous centipede might be wriggling towards me over the slime of the stones, some poisonous spider be preparing to drop from the roof. Fu-Manchu might have released a serpent in the cellar, or the air be alive with microbes of a loathsome disease. "Smith," I said, scarcely recognizing my own voice, "I can't bear this suspense. He intends to kill us, that is certain, but—" "Don't worry," came the reply. "He intends to learn our plans first." "You mean, you heard him speak of his files and of his wire jacket?" "Oh, my God," I groaned. "Can this be England?" Smith laughed dryly, and I heard him fumbling with the steel collar about his neck. "I have one great hope," he said, "since you share my captivity, but we must neglect no minor chance. Try with your pocket-knife if you can force the lock. I am trying to break this one." Truth to tell, the idea had not entered my half-dazed mind, but I immediately acted upon my friend's suggestion, setting to work with the small blade of my knife. I was so engaged, and, having snapped one blade, was about to open another, when a sound arrested me. It came from beneath my feet. "Smith," I whispered, "listen." The scraping and clicking which told of Smith's efforts ceased. Motionless, we sat in that humid darkness and listened. Something was moving beneath the stones of the cellar. I held my breath. Every nerve in my body was strung up. A line of light showed a few feet from where we lay. It widened, became an oblong. A trap was lifted, and within a yard of me there rose a dimly seen head. Horror I had expected, and death, or worse. Instead, I saw a lovely face, crowned with a disordered mass of curling hair. I saw a white arm upholding the stone slab, a shapely arm clasped about the elbow by a broad gold bangle. The girl climbed into the cellar and placed the lantern on the stone floor. In the dim light, she was unreal, A figure from an opium vision, with her clinging silk draperies and garish jewellery, with her feet encased in little red slippers. In short, this was the houri of my vision, materialised. It was difficult to believe that we were in modern, up-to-date England, easy to dream that we were the captives of a caliph in a dungeon in old Baghdad. "My prayers are answered," said Smith softly. "She has come to save you." "Esh!" warned the girl, and her wonderful eyes opened widely, fearfully. "A sound, and he will kill us all." She bent over me, a key jarred in the lock which had broken my penknife, and the collar was off. As I rose to my feet, the girl turned and released Smith. She raised the lantern above the trap and signed to us to descend the wooden steps which its light revealed. "Your knife," she whispered to me. "Leave it on the floor. He will think you forced the locks. Down! Quickly!" Nayland Smith, stepping gingerly, disappeared into the darkness. I rapidly followed. Last of all came our mysterious friend, a gold band about one of her ankles gleaming in the rays of the lantern which she carried. We stood in a low arched passage. "Tie your handkerchiefs over your eyes, and do exactly as I tell you," she ordered. Neither of us hesitated to obey her. Blindfolded, I allowed her to lead me, and Smith rested his hand upon my shoulder. In that order we proceeded, and came to stone steps which we ascended. "Keep to the wall on the left," came a whisper. "There is danger on the right." With my free hand I felt for and found the wall, and we pressed forward. The atmosphere of the place through which we were passing was steamy and loaded with an odour like that of exotic plant life. But a faint animal scent crept to my nostrils too, and there was a subdued stir about me, infinitely suggestive, mysterious. Now my feet sank in a soft carpet, and a curtain brushed my shoulder. "Ong" sounded. The din of distant drumming came to my ears. "Where in heaven's name are we?" hissed Smith in my ear. "That is a tom-tom. S-sh, S-sh." The little hand grasping mine quivered nervously. We were near a door or a window, for a breath of perfume was wafted through the air, and it reminded me of my other meetings with the beautiful woman who was now leading us from the house of Fu-Manchu, who, with her own lips, had told me that she was his slave. Through the horrible phantasmagoria she flitted, a seductive vision, her piquant loveliness standing out richly in its black setting of murder and devilry. Not once, but 1,000 times, I had tried to reason out the nature of the tie which bound her to the sinister doctor. Silence fell. "Quick, this way!" Down a thickly carpeted stair we went. Our guide opened a door and led us along a passage. Another door was opened, and we were in the open air. But the girl never tarried, pulling me along a gravelled path with a fresh breeze blowing in my face, and along until, unmistakably, I stood upon the river-bank. Now, planking creaked to our tread, and looking downward beneath the handkerchief, I saw the gleam of water beneath my feet. "Be careful," I was warned, and found myself stepping into a narrow boat. A punt. Nayland Smith followed, and the girl pushed the punt off and poled out into the stream. "Don't speak," she directed. My brain was fevered. I scarce knew if I dreamed and was waking, or if the reality ended with my imprisonment in the clammy cellar, and this silent escape, blindfolded, upon the river with a girl for our guide who might have stepped out of the pages of the Arabian Nights, were fantasy. The mockery of sleep. Indeed, I began seriously to doubt if this stream whereon we floated, whose waters plashed and tinkled about us, were the Thames, the Tigris, or the Styx. The punt touched a bank. "You will hear a clock strike in a few minutes," said the girl with her soft, charming accent, "but I rely upon your honour not to remove the handkerchiefs until then. You owe me this." "We do," said Smith fervently. I heard him scrambling to the bank, and a moment later a soft hand was placed in mine, and I, too, was guided on to terra firma. Arrived on the bank, I still held the girl's hand, drawing her towards me. "You must not go back," I whispered. "We will take care of you. You must not return to that place." "Let me go," she said. "When, once, I asked you to take me from him, you spoke of police protection. That was your answer, police protection. You would let them lock me up, imprison me, and make me betray him. For what? For what?" She wrenched herself free. "How little you understand me. Never mind. Perhaps one day you will know. Until the clock strikes." She was gone. I heard the creak of the punt, the drip of the water from the pole. Fainter it grew, and fainter. "What is her secret?" muttered Smith beside me. "Why does she cling to that monster?" The distant sound died away entirely. A clock began to strike. It struck the half-hour. In an instant my handkerchief was off, and so was Smith's. We stood upon a towing path. Away to the left, the moon shone upon the towers and battlements of an ancient fortress. It was Windsor Castle. 10:30, cried Smith. 2 hours to save Graham Guthrie. We had exactly 14 minutes in which to catch the last train to Waterloo, and we caught it. But I sank into a corner of the compartment in a state bordering upon collapse. Neither of us, I think, could have managed another 20 yards. With a lesser stake than a human life at issue, I doubt if we should have attempted that dash to Windsor Station. "Due at Waterloo at 11:51, panted Smith. "That gives us 39 minutes to get to the other side of the river and reach his hotel. Where in heaven's name is that house situated? Did we come up or downstream? I couldn't determine. But at any rate, it stands close to the riverside. It should be merely a question of time to identify it. I shall set Scotland Yard to work immediately, but I am hoping for nothing. Our escape will warn him." I said no more for a time, sitting wiping the perspiration from my forehead and watching my friend load his cracked briar with the broad-cut Latakia mixture. "Smith," I said at last, "what was that horrible wailing we heard, and what did Fu-Manchu mean when he referred to Rangoon? I noticed how it affected you." My friend nodded and lighted his pipe. "There was a ghastly business there in 1908 or early in 1909, he replied. "An utterly mysterious epidemic. And this beastly wailing was associated with it." "In what way? And what do you mean by an epidemic?" "It began, I believe, at the Palace Mansions Hotel, in the cantonments. A young American, whose name I cannot recall, was staying there on business connected with some new iron buildings. One night he went to his room, locked the door, and jumped out of the window into the courtyard. Broke his neck, of course. Suicide? Apparently. But there were singular features in the case. For instance, his revolver lay beside him, fully loaded. In the courtyard? In the courtyard. Was it murder by any chance?" Smith shrugged his shoulders. "His door was found locked from the inside, had to be broken in. But the whaling business? That began later, or was only noticed later. A French doctor, named Lafitte, died in exactly the same way. At the same place, at the same hotel, but he occupied a different room. Here is the extraordinary part of the affair. A friend shared the room with him, and actually saw him go." "Saw him leap from the window?" "Yes. The friend, an Englishman, was aroused by the uncanny wailing. I was in Rangoon at the time, so that I know more of the case of Lafitte than of that of the American. I spoke to the man about it personally. He was an electrical engineer, Edward Martin, and he told me that the cry seemed to come from above him. It seemed to come from above when we heard it at Fu-Manchu's house. Martin sat up in bed. It was a clear moonlight night, the sort of moonlight you get in Burma. Lafitte, for some reason, had just gone to the window. His friend saw him look out. The next moment, with a dreadful scream, he threw himself forward and crashed down into the courtyard. What then? Martin ran to the window and looked down. Lafitte's scream had aroused the place, of course, but there was absolutely nothing to account for the occurrence. There was no balcony, no ledge, by means of which anyone could reach the window. But how did you come to recognize the cry? I stopped at the Palace Mansions for some time, and one night this uncanny howling aroused me. I heard it quite distinctly, and am never likely to forget it. It was followed by a hoarse yell. The man in the next room, an orchid hunter, had gone the same way as the others. Did you change your quarters? No. Fortunately for the reputation of the hotel, a first-class establishment, several similar cases occurred elsewhere, both in Rangoon, in Prome, and in Moulmein. A story got about the native quarter, and was fostered by some mad fakir, that the god Siva was reborn, and that the cry was his call for victims, a ghastly story which led to an outbreak of dacoity and gave the district superintendent no end of trouble. Was there anything unusual about the bodies? They all developed marks after death, as though they had been strangled. The The marks were said all to possess a peculiar form, though it was not appreciable to my eye, and this, again, was declared to be the 5 heads of Siva. Were the deaths confined to Europeans? Oh, no! Several Burmans and others died in the same way. At first there was a theory that the victims had contracted leprosy and committed suicide as a result, but the medical evidence disproved that. The call of Siva became a perfect nightmare throughout Burma. Did you ever hear it again before this evening? Yes. I heard it on the upper Irrawaddy one clear moonlight night, and a Kalassi, a deckhand, leaped from the top deck of the steamer aboard which I was travelling. My God, to think that the fiend Fu-Manchu has brought that to England. But brought what, Smith? I cried in perplexity. What has he brought? An evil spirit? A mental disease? What is it? What can it be? A new agent of death, Petrie. Something born in a plague spot of Burma, the home of much that is unclean and much that is inexplicable. Heaven grant that we be in time, and are able to save Guthrie. Chapter 15. The train was late, and as our cab turned out of Waterloo Station and began to ascend to the bridge, from 100 steeples rang out the gongs of midnight, the bell of St. Night. Paul's raised above them all to vie with the deep voice of Big Ben. I looked out from the cab window across the river to where, towering above the embankment, that place of 1,000 tragedies, the light of some of London's greatest caravanserais formed a sort of minor constellation. From the subdued blaze that showed the public supper rooms, I looked up to the hundreds of starry points marking the private apartments of those giant inns. I thought how each twinkling window denoted the presence of some bird of passage, some wanderer temporarily abiding in our midst. There, floor piled upon floor above the chattering throngs, were these less gregarious units, each something of a mystery to his fellow guests, each in his separate cell, and each as remote from real human companionship as if that cell were fashioned, not in the bricks of London, but in the rocks of Hindustan. In one of those rooms Graham Guthrie might at that moment be sleeping, all unaware that he would awake to the call of Siva, to the summons of death. As we neared the Strand, Smith stopped the cab, discharging the man outside Sotheby's auction rooms. "One of the doctor's watchdogs may be in the foyer," he said thoughtfully, "and it might spoil everything if we were seen to go to Guthrie's rooms. There must be a back entrance to the kitchens and so on." "There is," I replied quickly. "I have seen the vans delivering there. But have we time?" "Yes. Lead on." We walked up the Strand and hurried westward. Into that narrow court, with its iron posts and descending steps, upon which opens a well-known wine cellar, we turned. Then, going parallel with the Strand, but on the embankment level, we ran round the back of the great hotel, and came to double doors which were open. An arc lamp illuminated the interior, and a number of men were at work among the casks, crates, and packages stacked about the place. We entered. "Hello!" cried a man in a white overall. "Where do you think you're going?" Smith grasped him by the arm. "I want to get to the public part of the hotel without being seen from the entrance hall," he said. "Will you please lead the way? Here," began the other, staring. "Don't waste time," snapped my friend, in that tone of authority which he knew so well how to assume. "It's a matter of life and death. Lead the way, I say." "Police, sir?" asked the man civilly. "Yes," said Smith. "Hurry." Off went our guide without further demur. Skirting sculleries, kitchens, laundries, and engine rooms, he led us through those mysterious labyrinths which have no existence for the guest above, but which contain the machinery that renders these modern khans, the Aladdin's palaces. They are. On a second-floor landing, we met a man in a tweed suit, to whom our cicerone presented us. "Glad I met you, sir." "Two gentlemen from the police." The man regarded us haughtily with a suspicious smile. "Who are you?" he asked. "You're not from Scotland Yard, at any rate?" Smith pulled out a card and thrust it into the speaker's hand. "If you are the hotel detective," he said, "take us without delay to Mr. Graham Guthrie." A marked change took place in the other's demeanour on glancing at the card in his hand. "Excuse me, sir," he said deferentially, "but of course I didn't know who I was speaking to. We all have instructions to give you every assistance. Is Mr. Guthrie in his room?" "He's been in his room for some time, sir. You will want to get there without being seen. This way. We can join the lift on the 3rd floor." Off we went again, with our new guide. In the lift. "Have you noticed anything suspicious about the place tonight?" asked Smith. "I have," was the startling reply. "That accounts for your finding me where you did. My usual post is in the lobby. But about 11 o'clock, when the theatre people began to come in, I had a hazy sort of impression that someone or something slipped past in the crowd, something that had no business in the hotel." We got out of the lift. "I don't quite follow you," said Smith. "If you thought you saw something entering, you must have formed a more or less definite impression regarding it." "That's the funny part of the business," answered the man doggedly. "I didn't. But as I stood at the top of the stairs, I could have sworn that there was something crawling up behind a party, 2 ladies and 2 gentlemen." "A dog, for instance?" "It didn't strike me as being a dog, sir. Anyway, when the party passed me, there was nothing there. Mind you, whatever it was, it hadn't come in by the front. I have made inquiries everywhere, but without result." He stopped abruptly. "Oh, 89, Mr. Guthrie's door, sir." Smith knocked. "Hello," came a muffled voice. "What do you want? Open the door. Don't delay. It is important." He turned to the hotel detective. "Stay right there where you can watch the stairs and the lift," he instructed, "and note everyone and everything that passes this door. But whatever you see or hear, do nothing without my orders." The man moved off, and the door was opened. Smith whispered in my ear, "Some creature of Dr. Fu-Manchu is in the hotel." Mr. Graham Guthrie, British resident in North Bhutan, was a big, thick-set man, grey-haired and florid, with widely opened eyes of the true fighting blue, a bristling moustache and prominent shaggy brows. Nayland Smith introduced himself tersely, proffering his card and an open letter. "Those are my credentials, Mr. Guthrie," he said, "so no doubt you will realize that the business which brings me and my friend Dr. Petrie here at such an hour is of the first importance." He switched off the light. "There is no time for ceremony," he explained. "It is now 25 minutes past 12. At 1:30 an attempt will be made upon your life." "Mr. Smith," said the other, who, arrayed in his pyjamas, was seated on the edge of the bed, "you alarm me very greatly. I may mention that I was advised of your presence in England this morning. Do you know anything respecting the person called Fu-Manchu, Dr. Fu-Manchu?" "Only what I was told today, that he is the agent of an advanced political group. It is opposed to his interests that you should return to Bhutan. A more gullible agent would be preferable. Therefore, unless you implicitly obey my instructions, you will never leave England." Graham Guthrie breathed quickly. I was growing more used to the gloom, and I could dimly discern him, his face turned towards Nayland Smith, whilst with his hand he clutched the bed-rail. Such a visit as ours, I think, must have shaken the nerve of any man. "But, Mr. Smith," he said, "surely I am safe enough here. The place is full of American visitors at present, and I have had to be content with a room right at the top, so that the only danger I apprehend is that of fire." "There is another danger," replied Smith. "The fact that you are at the top of the building enhances that danger. Do you recall anything of the mysterious epidemic which broke out in Rangoon in 1908, the deaths due to the call of Siva?" "I read of it in the Indian papers," said Guthrie uneasily. "Suicides, were they not?" "No," snapped Smith. "Murders." There was a brief silence. "From what I recall of the cases," said Guthrie, "that seems impossible. In several instances the victims threw themselves from the windows of locked rooms, and the windows were quite inaccessible." "Exactly," replied Smith, and in the dim light his revolver gleamed dully as he placed it on the small table beside the bed. "Except that your door is unlocked, the conditions tonight are identical. Silence, please. I hear a clock striking." It was Big Ben. It struck the half-hour, leaving the stillness complete. In that room, high above the activity which yet prevailed below, high above the supping crowds in the hotel, high above the starving crowds on the embankment, a curious chill of isolation swept about me. Again, I realized how, in the very heart of the great metropolis, a man may be as far from aid as in the heart of a desert. I was glad that I was not alone in that room marked with the death mark of Fu-Manchu, and I am certain that Graham Guthrie welcomed his unexpected company. I may have mentioned the fact before, but on this occasion it became so peculiarly evident to me that I am constrained to record it here. I refer to the sense of impending danger which invariably preceded a visit from Fu-Manchu. Even had I not known that an attempt was to be made that night, I should have realized it as, strung to high tension, I waited in the darkness. Some invisible herald went ahead of the dreadful Chinaman, proclaiming his coming to every nerve in one's body. It was like a breath of astral incense, announcing the presence of the priests of death. A wail, low but singularly penetrating, falling in minor cadences to a new silence, came from somewhere close at hand. "My God," hissed Guthrie, "what was that?" "The call of Siva," whispered Smith. "Don't stir, for your life." Guthrie was breathing hard. I knew that we were three, that the hotel detective was within hail, that there was a telephone in the room, that the traffic of the embankment moved almost beneath us. But I knew, and am not ashamed to confess, that King Fear had icy fingers about my heart. It was awful, that tense waiting for what? 3 taps sounded, very distinctly upon the window. Graham Guthrie started so as to shake the bed. "It's supernatural," he muttered, all that was Celtic in his blood recoiling from the omen. "Nothing human can reach that window." Shish from Smith. "Don't stir." The tapping was repeated. Smith softly crossed the room. My heart was beating painfully. He threw open the window. Further inaction was impossible. I joined him, and we looked out into the empty air. "Don't come too near, Petrie," he warned over his shoulder. One on either side of the open window, we stood and looked down at the moving embankment lights, at the glitter of the Thames, at the silhouetted buildings on the farther bank, with the shot tower starting above them all. 3 taps sounded on the panes above us. In all my dealings with Dr. Fu-Manchu, I had had to face nothing so uncanny as this. What Burmese ghoul had he loosed? Was it outside, in the air? Was it actually in the room? "Don't let me go, Petrie," whispered Smith suddenly. "Get a tight hold on me." That was the last straw, for I thought that some dreadful fascination was impelling my friend to hurl himself out. Wildly I threw my arms about him, and Guthrie leaped forward to help. Smith leaned from the window and looked up. One choking cry he gave, smothered, inarticulate, and I found him slipping from my grip, being drawn out of the window, drawn to his death. "Hold him, Guthrie," I gasped hoarsely. "My God, he's going! Hold him!" My friend writhed in our grasp, and I saw him stretch his arm upward. The crack of his revolver came, and he collapsed onto the floor, carrying me with him. But as I fell, I heard a scream above. Smith's revolver went hurtling through the air, and, hard upon it, went a black shape, flashing past the open window into the gulf of the night. "The light! The light!" I cried. Guthrie ran and turned on the light. Nayland Smith, his eyes starting from his head, his face swollen, lay plucking at a silken cord which showed tight about his throat. "It was a thug!" screamed Guthrie. "Get the rope off! He's choking!" My hands a-twitch, I seized the strangling cord. "A knife, quick!" I cried. "I have lost mine!" Guthrie ran to the dressing table and passed me an open penknife. I somehow forced the blade between the rope and Smith's swollen neck and severed the deadly silken thing. Smith made a choking noise and fell back swooning in my arms. When, later, we stood looking down upon the mutilated thing which had been brought in from where it fell, Smith showed me a mark on the brow close beside the wound where his bullet had entered. "The mark of Kali," he said. The man was a Fanziger, a religious strangler. Since Fu-Manchu has dacoits in his service, I might have expected that he would have thugs. A group of these fiends would seem to have fled into Burma, so that the mysterious epidemic in Rangoon was really an outbreak of thuggee on slightly improved lines. I had suspected something of the kind, but naturally I had not looked for thugs near Rangoon. My unexpected resistance led the strangler to bungle the rope. You have seen how it was fastened about my throat. That was unscientific. The true method, as practiced by the group operating in Burma, was to throw the line about the victim's neck and jerk him from the window. A man leaning from an open window is very nicely poised. It requires only a slight jerk to pitch him forward. No loop was used, but a running line, which, as the victim fell, remained in the hand of the murderer. No clue. Therefore we see at once what commended the system to Fu-Manchu. Graham Guthrie, very pale, stood looking down at the dead strangler. "I owe you my life, Mr. Smith," he said. "If you had come 5 minutes later—" He grasped Smith's hand. "You see," Guthrie continued, "no one thought of looking for a thug in Burma, and no one thought of the roof. These fellows are as active as monkeys, and where an ordinary man would infallibly break his neck, they are entirely at home. I might have chosen my room especially for the business. He slipped in late this evening," said Smith. "The hotel detective saw him, but these stranglers are as elusive as shadows. Otherwise, despite their having changed the scene of their operations, not one could have survived." "Didn't you mention a case of this kind on the Irrawaddy?" I asked. "Yes," was the reply, "and I know of what you are thinking. The steamers of the Irrawaddy flotilla have a corrugated iron roof over the top deck. The thug must have been lying up there as the Collassie passed on the deck below." "But, Smith, what is the motive of the call?" I continued. "Partly religious," he explained, "and partly to wake the victims. You are perhaps going to ask me how Dr. Fu-Manchu has obtained power over such people as Fanzigers. I can only reply that Dr. Fu-Manchu has secret knowledge of which, so far, we know absolutely nothing, but, despite all, at last I begin to score." "You do," I agreed, "but your victory took you near to death." "I owe my life to you, Petrie," he said. "Once to your strength of arm, and once to—" "Don't speak of her, Smith," I interrupted. "Dr. Fu-Manchu may have discovered the part she played, in which event, God help her." Chapter 16. Upon the following day we were afoot again, and shortly at hand-grips with the enemy. In retrospect, that restless time offers a chaotic prospect, with no peaceful spot amid its turmoils. All that was reposeful in nature seemed to have become an irony and a mockery to us. Who knew how an evil demigod had his sacrificial altars amid our sweetest groves? This idea ruled strongly in my mind upon that soft autumnal day. "The net is closing in," said Nayland Smith. "Let us hope upon a big catch," I replied with a laugh. Beyond where the Thames tided slumberously seaward showed the roofs of Royal Windsor, the castle towers showing through the autumn haze. The peace of beautiful Thames, sighed, was about us. This was one of the few tangible clues upon which thus far we had chanced, but at last it seemed indeed that we were narrowing the resources of that enemy of the white race who was writing his name over England in characters of blood. To capture Dr. Fu-Manchu we did not hope, but at least there was every promise of destroying one of the enemy's strongholds. We had circled upon the map a tract of country cut by the Thames, with Windsor for its centre. Within that circle was the house from which miraculously we had escaped, a house used by the most highly organized group in the history of criminology. So much we knew. Even if we found the house, and this was likely enough, to find it vacated by Fu-Manchu and his mysterious servants, we were prepared. But it would be a base destroyed. We were working upon a methodical plan, and although our cooperators were invisible, these numbered no fewer than 12, all of them experienced men. Thus far we had drawn blank, but the place for which Smith and I were making now came clearly into view, an old mansion situated in extensive walled grounds. Leaving the river behind us, we turned sharply to the right along a lane flanked by a high wall. On an open patch of ground, as we passed, I noted a gypsy caravan. An old woman was seated on the steps, her wrinkled face bent, her chin resting in the palm of her hand. I scarcely glanced at her, but pressed on, nor did I notice that my friend no longer was beside me. I was all anxiety to come to some point from whence I might obtain a view of the house, all anxiety to know if this was the abode of our mysterious enemy, the place where he worked amid his weird company, where he bred his deadly scorpions and his bacilli, reared his poisonous fungi, from whence he dispatched his murder ministers. Above all, perhaps, I wondered if this would prove to be the hiding-place of the beautiful slave girl who was such a potent factor in the doctor's plans, but a two-edged sword which yet we hoped to turn upon Fu-Manchu. Even in the hands of a master, a woman's beauty is a dangerous weapon. A cry rang out behind me. I turned quickly, and a singular sight met my gaze. Nayland Smith was engaged in a furious struggle with the old gypsy woman. His long arms clasped about her, he was roughly dragging her out into the roadway, she fighting like a wild thing, silently, fiercely. Smith often surprised me, but at that sight, frankly, I thought that he was become bereft of reason. I ran back, and I had almost reached the scene of this incredible contest, and Smith now was evidently hard put to it to hold his own, when a man, swarthy, with big rings in his ears, leaped from the caravan. One quick glance he threw in our direction and made off towards the river. Smith twisted round upon me, never releasing his hold of the woman. "After him, Petrie," he cried. "After him. Don't let him escape." "It's a dacoit." My brain in a confused whirl, my mind yet disposed to a belief that my friend had lost his senses, the word dacoit was sufficient. I started down the road after the fleetly running man. Never once did he glance behind him, so that he evidently had occasion to fear pursuit. The dusty road rang beneath my flying footsteps. That sense of fantasy, which claimed me often enough in those days of our struggle with the titanic genius whose victory meant the victory of the yellow races over the white, now had me fast in its grip again. I was an actor in one of those dream scenes of the grim Fu-Manchu drama. Out over the grass and down to the river's brink ran the gypsy who was no gypsy, but one of that far more sinister brotherhood, the dacoits. I was close upon his heels. But I was not prepared for him to leap in among the rushes at the margin of the stream, and seeing him do this, I pulled up quickly. Straight into the water he plunged, and I saw that he held some object in his hand. He waded out, he dived, and as I gained the bank and looked to right and left, he had vanished completely. Only ever-widening rings showed where he had been. I had him. For directly he rose to the surface, he would be visible from either bank, and with the police whistle which I carried, I could, if necessary, summon one of the men in hiding across the stream. I waited. A wild fowl floated serenely past, untroubled by this strange invasion of his precincts. A full minute I waited. From the lane behind me came Smith's voice. "Don't let him escape, Petrie." Never lifting my eyes from the water, I waved my hand reassuringly. But still the dacoit did not rise. I searched the surface in all directions as far as my eyes could reach, but no swimmer showed above it. Then it was that I concluded he had dived too deeply, become entangled in the weeds, and was drowned. With a final glance to right and left and some feeling of awe at this sudden tragedy, this grim going out of a life at glorious noonday, I turned away. Smith had the woman securely, but I had not taken 5 steps towards him when a faint splash behind warned me. Instinctively I ducked. From whence that saving instinct arose I cannot surmise, but to it I owed my life. For as I rapidly lowered my head, something hummed past me, something that flew out over the grass bank and fell with a jangle upon the dusty roadside. A knife. I turned and bounded back to the river's brink. I heard a faint cry behind me, which could only have come from the gypsy woman. Nothing disturbed the calm surface of the water. The reach was lonely of rowers. Out by the farther bank a girl was poling a punt along, and her white-clad figure was the only living thing that moved upon the river within the range of the most expert knife-thrower. To say that I was nonplussed is to say less than the truth. I was amazed. That it was the dacoit who had shown me this murderous attention I could not doubt. But where in heaven's name was he? He could not humanly have remained below water for so long, yet he certainly was not above, was not upon the surface, concealed amongst the reeds, nor hidden upon the bank. There, in the bright sunshine, a consciousness of the eerie possessed me. It was with an uncomfortable feeling that my phantom foe might be aiming a second knife at my back that I turned away and hastened towards Smith. My fearful expectations were not realized, and I picked up the little weapon which had so narrowly missed me, and with it in my hand rejoined my friend. He was standing with one arm closely clasped about the apparently exhausted woman, and her dark eyes were fixed upon him with an extraordinary expression. "What does it mean, Smith?" I began, but he interrupted me. "Where is the dacoit?" he demanded rapidly. "Since he seemingly possesses the attributes of a fish," I replied, "I cannot pretend to say." The gypsy woman lifted her eyes to mine and laughed. Her laughter was musical, not that of such an old hag as Smith held captive. It was familiar, too. I started and looked closely into the wizened face. "He's tricked you," said Smith, an angry note in his voice. "What is that you have in your hand?" I showed him the knife, and told him how it had come into my possession. "I know," he rapped. "I saw it. He was in the water not 3 yards from where you stood. I must have seen him. Was there nothing visible?" "Nothing. The woman laughed again, and again I wondered. "A wild fowl," I added. "Nothing else." "A wild fowl," snapped Smith. "If you will consult your recollections of the habits of wildfowl, you will see that this particular specimen was a rara avius. It's an old trick, Petrie, but a good one, for it is used in decoying. A dacoit's head was concealed in that wild fowl. It's useless. He has certainly made good his escape by now." "Smith," I said, somewhat crestfallen, "why are you detaining this gypsy woman?" "Gypsy woman," he laughed, hugging her tightly as she made an impatient movement. "Use your eyes, old man." He jerked the frowsy wig from her head, and beneath was a cloud of disordered hair that shimmered in the sunlight. "A wet sponge will do the rest," he said. Into my eyes, widely opened in wonder, looked the dark eyes of the captive, and beneath the disguise I picked out the charming features of the slave girl. There were tears on the whitened lashes, and she was submissive now. "This time," said my friend hardly, "we have fairly captured her, and we will hold her." From somewhere upstream came a faint call. The dacoit. Nayland Smith's lean body straightened. He stood alert, strung up. Another call answered, and a third responded. Then followed the flatly shrill note of a police whistle, and I noted a column of black vapor rising beyond the wall, mounting straight to heaven as the smoke of a welcome offering. The surrounded mansion was in flames. "Curse it," rapped Smith. So this time we were right. But, of course, he has had ample opportunity to remove his effects. I knew that. The man's daring is incredible. He has given himself till the very last moment, and we blundered upon 2 of the outposts. I lost one. No matter. We have the other. I expect no further arrests, and the house will have been so well fired by the doctor's servants that nothing can save it. I fear its ashes will afford us no clue, Petrie, but we have secured a lever which should serve to disturb Fu-Manchu's world. He glanced at the queer figure which hung submissively in his arms. She looked up proudly. "You need not hold me so tight," she said in her soft voice. "I will come with you." That I moved amid singular happenings, you who have borne with me thus far have learned, and that I witnessed many curious scenes, but of the many such scenes in that race drama wherein Nayland Smith and Dr. Fu-Manchu played the leading parts, I remember none more bizarre than the one at my rooms that afternoon. Without delay, and without taking the Scotland Yard men into our confidence, we had hurried our prisoner back to London, for my friend's authority was supreme. A strange trio we were, and one which excited no little comment, but the journey came to an end at last. Now we were in my unpretentious sitting-room, the room wherein Smith first had unfolded to me the story of Dr. Fu-Manchu and of the great secret society which sought to upset the balance of the world, to place Europe and America beneath the sceptre of Cathay. I sat with my elbows upon the writing table, my chin in my hands. Smith restlessly paced the floor, relighting his blackened briar a dozen times in as many minutes. In the big armchair the pseudo-gypsy was curled up. A brief toilet had converted the wizened old woman's face into that of a fascinatingly pretty girl. Wildly picturesque, she looked in her ragged Romany garb. She held a cigarette in her fingers and watched us through lowered lashes. Seemingly, with true Oriental fatalism, she was quite reconciled to her fate, and ever and anon she would bestow upon me a glance from her beautiful eyes which few men, I say with confidence, could have sustained unmoved. Though I could not be blind to the emotions of that passionate Eastern soul, yet I strove not to think of them. Accomplice of an arch-murderer she might be, but she was dangerously lovely. "That man who was with you," said Smith, suddenly turning upon her, "was in Burma up till quite recently. He murdered a fisherman 30 miles above Prome, only a month before I left. The DSP had placed 1,000 rupees on his head. Am I right?" The girl shrugged her shoulders. "Suppose, what then?" she asked. "Suppose I handed you over to the police," suggested Smith. But he spoke without conviction, for in the recent past we both had owed our lives to this girl. "As you please," she replied. "The police would learn nothing." "You do not belong to the Far East," my friend said abruptly. "You may have Eastern blood in your veins, but you are no kin of Fu-Manchu." "That is true," she admitted, and knocked the ash from her cigarette. "Will you tell me where to find Fu-Manchu?" She shrugged her shoulders again, glancing eloquently in my direction. Smith walked to the door. "I must make out my report, Petrie," he said. "Look after the prisoner. and as the door closed softly behind him, I knew what was expected of me, but honestly, I shirked my responsibility. What attitude should I adopt? How should I go about my delicate task? In a quandary, I stood watching the girl whom singular circumstances saw captive in my rooms. "You do not think we would harm you?" I began awkwardly. "No harm shall come to you. Why will you not trust us?" She raised her brilliant eyes. "Of what avail has your protection been to some of those others?" she said. "Those others whom He has sought for. Alas, it had been of none, and I knew it well." I thought I grasped the drift of her words. "You mean that if you speak, Fu-Manchu will find a way of killing you? Of killing me?" she flashed scornfully. "Do I seem one to fear for myself? Then what do you fear?" I asked in surprise. She looked at me oddly. "When I was seized and sold for a slave," she answered slowly, "my sister was taken too, and my brother." "A child." She spoke the word with a tender intonation, and her slight accent rendered it the more soft. "My sister died in the desert. My brother lived. Better, far better that he had died too." Her words impressed me intensely. "Of what are you speaking?" I questioned. "You speak of slave raids, of the desert. Where did these things take place? Of what country are you? Does it matter?" she questioned in turn. "Of what country am I? A slave has no country, no name." "No name," I cried. "You may call me Karamane," she said. "As Karamane, I was sold to Dr. Fu-Manchu, and my brother also he purchased. We were cheap at the price he paid." She laughed shortly, wildly. "But he has spent a lot of money to educate me. My brother is all that is left to me in the world to love, and he is in the power of Dr. Fu-Manchu. You understand? It is upon him the blow will fall. You ask me to fight against Fu-Manchu. You talk of protection. Did your protection save Sir Crichton Davy?" I shook my head sadly. "You understand now why I cannot disobey my master's orders, why, if I would, I dare not betray him." I walked to the window and looked out. How could I answer her arguments? What could I say? I heard the rustle of her ragged skirts, and she who called herself Karamane stood beside me. She laid her hand upon my arm. "Let me go," she pleaded. "He will kill him. He will kill him." Her voice shook with emotion. "He cannot revenge himself upon your brother when you are in no way to blame," I said angrily. "We arrested you. You are not here of your own free will." She drew her breath sharply, clutching at my arm, and in her eyes I could read that she was forcing her mind to some arduous decision. "Listen." She was speaking rapidly, nervously. "If I help you to take Dr. Fu-Manchu, tell you where he is to be found, alone, will you promise me, solemnly promise me, that you will immediately go to the place where I shall guide you and release my brother, that you will let us both go free?" "I will," I said without hesitation. "You may rest assured of it. But there is a condition," she added. "What is it?" "When I have told you where to capture him, you must release me." I hesitated. Smith often had accused me of weakness where this girl was concerned. What now was my plain duty? That she would utterly decline to speak under any circumstances, unless it suited her to do so, I felt assured. If she spoke the truth, in her proposed bargain there was no personal element. Her conduct I now viewed in a new light. Humanity, I thought, dictated that I accept her proposal, policy also. "I agree," I said, and looked into her eyes, which were aflame now with emotion, an excitement perhaps of anticipation, perhaps of fear. She laid her hands upon my shoulders. "You be careful," she said pleadingly. "For your sake," I replied. "I shall." "Not for my sake." "Then for your brother's?" "No." Her voice had sunk to a whisper. For your